Welcome to another Coffee with Samso. Here where we speak to ASX companies and their MDs about the stories and what the business is about. Today we're at the UWA Club here in Crawley at the University of WA. And today we're talking with Blackstone Resources with Scott Williamson. Scott's an old hand here with Coffee with Samso. And we haven't had a really good update since the last time we spoke. Scott, welcome. Look, good to see that you're fit and well after Diggers.
Only just.
Only just? Look, beautiful day, beautiful morning, winter's morning. Look, Blackstone's in that holding phase, I guess. Everyone's knowing that where you're headed and the surprises are gone. You're just building up numbers, feasibilities. One of the things that have come across to me from my conversation with people is how are things going in terms of, what's the process?
Yeah, so it's what we've just put out is our downstream business unit pre-feasibility study, and there's a lot to digest there. And now we'll show the upstream update as well. We've got 8 drill rigs operating at the mine level, which is the upstream, but the downstream is a little bit different to what we've done in the industry previously. So most nickel miners will in the past have always stopped at nickel concentrate, and then they've sold that to a major player like a BHP or Glencore or Jinchuan, and our downstream business is actually looking to purchase that concentrate off other nickel miners, as well as our own nickel mine, which is our upstream business, and then convert it into the precursor product for the lithium-ion battery, which is the NCM, nickel cobalt manganese 811. And so it is going to take a little bit of time for the market to digest that, and particularly for the market to understand that the funding will come from these major players in the industry. So that funding and that money that's flowing down from those major downstream players will allow us to fund this and move us into production and fast track us as quickly as we can, because a lot of the time funding can be something that holds you back, but we don't see any issues around funding.
I mean, in terms of the funding, I guess, like as you said, you're not going to have a problem. And we know the market's good for nickel at this point. That's not an issue. But on the counter of that, with the rise in nickel pricing, would that create an issue for your downstream process if you're taking feed for somewhere else?
No, we see the downstream business as a margin business that is not linked to the nickel price. So if anything, a higher nickel price creates more opportunity for the downstream business to source feedstock, because it allows those other miners to bring their mines into production. So we'll always be linked back to the nickel price, but it'll be a payability on concentrate. So payabilities on concentrate will be a discount to nickel. At the moment it's between 75 or 80% payability, so it's a discount to nickel metal, and then our final product is always a premium to nickel metal, and so that margin is always there regardless of where the nickel price runs to. So it's a business that can go through those cycles, and it's not a cyclical business like mining can be, particularly nickel mining. We can ride through those cycles. It's very much a cycle-proof business because it's a margin game, and so that nickel price doesn't affect our downstream business. It does affect our mine at the mine level. As the nickel price starts to run, which we're seeing now, then we continue to find it, I suppose, make more money at the mine level, but it doesn't affect the downstream.
Okay. And how is the actual mine, because obviously a lot of focus has been on the downstream and the new business and how it's going to add value for Blackstone. How is the mine site going in terms of getting it to that getting the nickel out of the stage, you know.
So we've got the existing concentrator which we're refurbing at the moment, so we're getting that ready to turn back on. So there's a lot of good work happening there, and we've got the existing underground mine which we're looking at potentially using to access some of the ore bodies that we're drilling out. So the mine's ready to go. We have a fully permitted tailings facility, fully permitted concentrator and underground mine, so that's all ready to go. We won't turn that on until the refining business is ready, because there's a tariff on concentrate. So we're better off turning that on once we have the downstream opportunity. But we're getting it ready for this pilot plant phase. So we can turn on the mine to feed into the pilot plant, and then we can start to generate cash flow from the pilot plant as well. So there's a real focus on starting it up and getting a little bit of cash flow through this pilot plant phase, and that, I think that'll be a key milestone for the market to understand that we can mine in Vietnam and we can build a refining business, and there's a lot of support from the local provincial government for us to go and get on with it. So I think that's what the market's probably missing, that they don't sort of see that us stepping through that process, but that's coming very soon. But yeah, meanwhile, 8 drill rigs drilling out 5 ore bodies, and that all comes into this pre-feasibility study for the upstream, which is due in Q4 this year.
I mean, I've used this famous statement you made about, you know, good geology will always bring sort of good results and things like that. In some ways, when I think about your mine itself, it's a done deal. Everything that comes out is, you know, sort of boring, because you know the results and you know it's going to build up. So playing devil's advocate, you know, what could, you know, topple the ivory tower?
Yeah, so there the mine level is a done deal, because we're in a world-class nickel sulfide district, and we've got world-class geologists working on it, and we're using the modern world-class geophysics to unlock this geology. So we will be mining there for the next 20 years. Permitting is something that we have to go through. There's a process of each ore body needs an amendment to our mining license. So there's a permitting process that we have to go through, and that's the same process we go through in Australia or anywhere in the world. So it's a very structured system, and there's good precedence of moving through that, which the previous owners did. So we're very focused on stepping through that process. And what is interesting is that the government ensures that you drill out your ore body to a nice tight spacing, which is great. So they make sure that the mine is definitely drilled out and ready, which I think is a really important part of their process. So, which is a lot different to other mining jurisdictions. They don't sort of specify the confidence that's required. So they're very focused on the drill spacing, which is great. So we're going forward with nice tight drill spacings on these ore bodies. But yeah, permitting is something that's difficult anywhere. There's an anti-mining movement, and that's a global problem. We don't see that in where we are. We've got a very supportive provincial government, and the local community is on board. They've been, the previous owners and our team on the ground have been working on this project for some of our people have been on this project for 20 years. So we've got the people there that can get this done.
I guess in support of what things are with the anti-mining and everything. I draw some comments I've had from people where it says, oh, you know, what does it cost these guys so much money to do this when we did this? But I know how they did it, and I think it's just a process, right? And also when you do it right, I mean, governments tend to be pro all these kind of projects because it creates jobs and their GDP is well fed and things like that. But in terms of the processing side of things, is there technical issues that people should be thinking of, or is this just, you know, a process of ticking boxes and, as he says, you know, compliance and things like that?
Yeah. So if we look at the key risks, I think permitting is the highest level. The next one would be the technical risk, and funding is the lowest risk at the moment from what we can see. So if we look at the technical risk, we're dealing with a technology which is the pressure oxidation technology. It's been around since the 1960s. So it's a technology that is tried and tested, well proven all through the mining industry, and we're very confident that there's, through that pilot plant phase, we can de-risk this technically. So we still do need to do the pilot plant to ensure that we can get the final product specs for the battery grade NCM 811, and we can change that to what the customer's requirements are. So we can tailor that to the particular customers that are coming into that pilot plant phase. So it's a really important phase of de-risking it technically, but also building that strong relationship with those end users and bringing their expertise to the table as well. So the technical risk we think is minimised by the fact that we're working very closely with those downstream partners. They're also bringing some technical expertise to the table, but the pilot plan is that sort of, I suppose, de-risking process. But we're dealing with technology that's been around for a long time.
The other point where I, again playing devil's advocate here, is when you think of where the product's going, the nickel content of the batteries, is there a risk coming from a change in going away from this kind of batteries? I mean, you guys, I'm pretty sure, would have looked at this kind of stuff. What's the market sort of swaying?
So, if anything, we see it moving to even higher nickel ratios. We're using 811, but by the time we're in production in 2024, it wouldn't surprise me if the movement is towards a 9.5.5, so 9 times nickel, 0.5 cobalt and 0.5 manganese. The nickel gives you the long range and the energy density for long range, and it is definitely required in the luxury market. The luxury market is all about long range, large vehicles, and so nickel is required if you want long range, and range anxiety is the reason why nickel has been a focus. There will be a lot of vehicles that can have lower nickel content, that if they're the vehicles that just move around the city and don't go into the long range distances, they don't require nickel, but that's only a very small part of the market, and that's not including things like trucks and pickup trucks. The bigger they are, the more nickel they need. The only problem is if there isn't enough nickel, then they have to start to look at how do we. So they're going to sacrifice things like range, and they will have to drop out nickel, because if there's not enough nickel, then they will have to look at other ratios, and so they are looking at maybe a little bit more manganese, but they're sacrificing range, and the luxury market is all about range.
I guess when I think going back almost 2 years, maybe a year and a bit, when China's government decided to cut subsidies to electric car manufacturers who don't reach that 300 or 400 kilometer range, kind of speaks in that what you're saying, right? There's a need for the electric cars to go the range as opposed to just doing that short distances. So in going forward for you guys, I guess the mine's sort of doing its thing, the processing is doing its thing. What's the investors looking for going 12-18 months before you get to your end goal?
So between now and the final investment decision, which is in 12 to 18 months' time, a lot of great work will be done at that pilot plant. So the way to think about the pilot plant, we're building a small scale of the ultimate refinery, and we will be building that in Vietnam, and all of our customers from around the world will be coming and seeing that in operation. They'll be able to purchase product off us as well, and they will pay for it, and we'll make profit on that. So that's all happening in the next 12 to 18 months, and that's a really exciting phase for the business, and so that will drive corporate activity, and so that will, through that process, we'll build our strong relationships with the end users, and then we'll be able to show the market what that looks like, because a lot of that's happening behind the scenes at the moment, and we're not rushing into anything really, because we're confident that that final product is in such high demand that it will take 12 to 18 months for all that to be executed. So to get a final investment decision, we need binding offtakes, and we need joint venture agreements, we need equity from those large players into the downstream business. So there's a lot of great work that we're going to be doing on that front. At the same time, continue to explore a world-class nickel sulfide district. So plenty of action, but I think what's really going to re-rate the stock is when we can start to show some of these partners that we're talking to, and really start to put some numbers around what that all looks like.
Yeah, sometimes when you're one side of the fence, on one side of the fence, you're looking and says, "Oh, can these guys do it? Can they do it?" And then, but on the other side of the fence, you know what you're dealing with, and then you can see the confidence. When you go and say, because we both agree that the critical part now is for you to show your fruits, right? So you're actually doing it. So when you go and stand in front of a crowd, and as you did 3 days ago, although you probably had a bit of help with courage, but you got EcoPro, you've got rising nickel prices, you've got the EV revolution, so the need for batteries and better batteries and things like that. So when you have that there, and also you're speaking to the market, that confidence you bring to the table, how much of that can you go out and say, you know what, we know we can do this because we got this, and the partners are saying this, the money's saying this, the market price is saying this. How much of that have you got, that confidence you can go on the table and say, here's this, all the evidence? Is that something that you carry going forward?
Yeah, so it's interesting, because I can say it till I'm blue in the face that we'll fund this, and we've got partners knocking this door down for our products. But until we actually show what that looks like, it's very difficult for the market to digest that. So, but it probably doesn't deserve such a discount to the fair value as it does, and I think that comes back to the jurisdiction. The majority of the market don't understand what a significant opportunity we have in Vietnam. I've said this a number of times over the last few days. If we were building this project in Kwinana, we'd probably be $1 billion company already. But there's no way we would ever do that, because of all the benefits that we see in building this in Vietnam. So once the market starts to understand Vietnam and the opportunity that we have in Vietnam with groups like VinFast, so VinFast will be a dominant player in the electric vehicle market. They're a Vietnamese conglomerate. The owner of VinFast has put $2 billion of his own money into electric vehicle manufacturing. They're looking at a $60 billion IPO on the NASDAQ. So no one's doing that in Kwinana. Mm-hmm. So we're right in the mix of major players in the industry. LG is looking to put $2 billion into the lithium-ion battery plant right next to the VinFast factory to bring all the batteries in. So no one's doing that in Kwinana. And the reason is because we don't have the green power here. And so the green power and the hydro renewable power, the green nickel product, the competitive labour costs, there's no reason why we would do it in Kwinana. But we're getting discounted because we're in Vietnam, and it's quite ridiculous, actually.
I think this is at this point where a lot of these new technology, or the move to that part of the EV world, the electric world, the green world, is greatly misunderstood or greatly underestimated in Australia, because in those countries, well, in everywhere else but Australia, we someone had a perfect phrase for Australia. We got lots of milk and honey. We don't realise that out there, it's very condensed, and everyone's just and sort of hustling. And as you said, that kind of investment is not one-off. It's a common thing that happens there in a lot of industries, right? There's billion-dollar investments and big investments, and when you have that, people forget that your job becomes easier. And I get that you're trying. Yes, you are saying it, but then you're going, well, it's just so easy. It's really hard to explain, to make it any more difficult than it is. Is that something that runs through your mind when you talk to people?
Yeah, and pre-COVID, we used to do a lot of site visits, and the only way to really understand the opportunity is to see it, and I think, and that's why we did that. And so, what we see is that our top 20 shareholders, other than management, are all institutional investors that understand the Vietnam opportunity, and so as we can hopefully show that, then we will get more people that are interested in the Vietnam opportunity, which is the largest growth story in the world right now. So it is very difficult to, if the investor doesn't understand Vietnam, it's very easy for the investor to not go there and just say, yeah, I'll watch it and see, and then but yeah, if they can understand Vietnam, it's a much easier investment to make, and that's what we've seen from the institutional investors that we've attracted.
I think Vietnam is really interesting in the sense that it's the next new boom, in my opinion, because China had that run, and then now you can see that a lot of things are moving to sort of what I call Southeast Asia, Indo-China, where that's the hub of everything. Like Thailand is a car manufacturer, and Australia is effectively not a car manufacturer anymore. And a lot of these industries are in that hub. And if your business is in that hub, your path to commercialization is significantly at ease, right? And I think that's a lot of times is missed, is that we forget that there is a world out there outside of the border of Australia, right?
Yes, very much so. And this is a great example of that, because the way that Vietnam have dealt with COVID, and they've achieved GDP growth, and there was only 2 or 3 countries in the whole of Asia that were able to do that, and one was China. So they are the next China. They are an opportunity for countries like South Korea and Japan to decouple their supply chains from China. So it is hard for people to think outside of what they know, which is most ASX resource investors know a lot about West Australian gold, but not much about Vietnam nickel, and that's what we're up against. Unfortunately, it's an unknown that a lot of people just don't have the time. They're making money in gold or wherever, maybe even West Australian nickel. They don't have the time to understand it, and they're not worried about it.
In some ways, that's a good opportunity for investors, right? And a lot of my guys that they talk to me and they followed us, since, as you pointed out, in the heydays when you were 15 cents, and we did our first coffee with Samsung, and a lot of them say, it's an industry it's the next sort of power source of how should I say it, miners or producers, because eventually when all this gets right, you're going to be in the midst of business. You're not trying to break into the business. And I think a lot of the guys, my feedback from them is that they're happy to sit there and they're just frustrated, as everybody would with a company at your stage, that you're not giving them that 50% growth over a weekend or something like that, which when you equate things, it's to where you guys have come from, what the business you're building, it's actually not in the scheme of things, right? So for investors, I guess, what would you say to them today? And where they're sitting there going, oh, twiddling their thumb, he's gone to 45, back to 35. I've got mates telling me, you put this in here, you'll make 5 times your money. What would you say to those guys?
What I'll say is we've spent a lot of time, money and effort on that pre-feasibility study. And in that we had today's valuation on today's final product pricing, and it says $3.5 billion NPV, and that's our base case. We're actually looking at the expansion case, which is twice the size of that, and that will build us in the top 5 Class 1 nickel producers in the world. So you could actually, if you wanted to, double that number. So, and the only way that we can get to that valuation for the shareholders is to build it. And we're going to build it with the least amount of dilution to the existing shareholders. And obviously the frustrating part about that is that to do that we need to get the share price up as high as possible, as quickly as possible. We have other ways of doing that through the strategic partners as well. We got EcoPro at a 62% premium to market. There's no reason why we can't do similar things again. So we are very focused on minimising dilution to the existing shareholders, but at the same time we need to build a mine, which requires some capital, and close the gap on that NPV. So if we look at a $3.5 billion company, and we ideally we don't put too many more shares on issue, there's not many opportunities out there like this, and I analysed a lot of mining stocks in my time. I can't remember a discount to NPV like we're seeing in this stock at the moment. So hang in there. It will move within the next 12 months because all of those de-risking events, which is off-takes, joint ventures, throwing in big checks, debt, these things will de-risk this over the next 12 months. It will happen in the next 12 months. Who knows where it lands on the upside, because there's some big numbers there.
I remember maybe 4 years ago there was already lots of talks about how the supply against demand of nickel, and the coppers and everything else was so low, but yet the pricing wasn't showing. And then now we got this big movement. I think we're at 19,000 or something like that. So it does happen, as you say, right? But it takes its time. It's at its own agenda. When it happens, it really happens. So the probably the sort of other question that everyone has on their lips is, going forward, you need capital. You're saying you don't want to dilute everything. So how confident are you getting that extra moolah to get where you want to go?
Yeah, so very confident that the money's there, and focused on minimising dilution. But if the market doesn't believe it, then a bit of dilution now is nothing compared to what it creates. So we will continue to raise money because we will build this, and then we will achieve those valuations. So we don't want to slow that down. We have a first mover advantage. We can't miss that opportunity. So like I said, funding is our lowest risk, and it's just going to be a matter of where do we get the share price up to before we hit the button on the next levels of funding, which if it's strategic, if it has a strategic element to it, then I think the market will be very happy, like we did with EcoPro.
Yeah, I agree. I think in the market, in a time when we are going forward, we're trying to be green and everything else, I think there's no other way to go but this. So if you're selling, water in the desert, they have to buy it from you, right? In that sense. And a lot of companies start off with a supposedly high market cap for that point in time, but they've got to understand the value add going forward, right? 150 million market cap here sounds maybe high for a company, but when it reaches 50 billion, the 150 million was cheap, you know. But anyway, look, Scott, glad to have you back, and you turned up this morning.
Just.
And I'm sure, you know, a few days in Diggers, you know, it's hard work, isn't it?
Yes. Listen, I've nearly lost my voice a couple of times, but yeah, it was good to get out there and meet everyone again. It gave us a good feeling of where the market's at, and yeah, the majors are very focused on this metal again, which is great, and and we need everyone on board. We need more nickel miners so that we can then feed our refining business. We will scale that business up as much as we can find the supply and lock in supply, because the demand side is something we've never seen before, and it's unprecedented what's coming for the nickel market. And yeah, it's a great time to be a nickel miner, because we're the ones that have the power at the negotiation table with these very major players in the industry.
Look, guys, Blackstone has we've been following Blackstone for 2 years, 3 years maybe or so, and I've always loved the story. It went from, you know, big miner with good deposits, good geology, and now we're in this downstream business. But, you know, do your research, reach out to Scott, because, you know, he's, as I always say, you know, he's too much time going to Diggers and partying. No, seriously, on a good note, I mean, look, Scott's got the knowledge. Reach out to him. Scott, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. It's a good update. I think a lot of people are sort of trying to understand where you guys are at. But yeah, thanks for your time, and let's have another chat another time.
Thanks, Noel.